Okay, this is the last of um, the things we're going to talk about from the Clean Air Act. We're going to talk about particulate matter. So, particulate matter is kind of just little small stuff in the air. It can be solids, it can be liquids, but oftentimes comes from the combustion of fossil fuels and biomass. Diesel was actually much worse than gasoline at putting out these chemicals when it was burned. Road dust, rock crushing, volcanoes, fires, dust storms, all of these things fall into particulate matter or little small stuff in the air. A couple years ago, there was some really big fires in our area, right? You could think a lot more about the particulate matter that you could even sometimes see or got left on your car. Sometimes it's so much it can block the sunlight and prevent photosynthesis if it's heavy enough. So we categorize it by its size, and this gives you a nice depiction, I think. Right here's your human hair, and then we're going to talk about where these things kind of fall on here. Um, PM 2.5, particulate matter 2.5, is the greatest health concern when we're talking about little stuff, the combustion of particles, compounds, metals, etc., because they can lodge deeply into your respiratory tract and they're more toxic than some of the other chemicals. Um, and then as we get a little bit bigger, particulate matter 10 is too small to be filtered by your respiratory tract, so it is also a health concern. These are things like dust, pollen, mold, etc. Anything larger than your PM10 or your particulate matter 10 can be caught by your nose or your throat and filtered out through your mucus. So that's really an important part of our human body, too, right? So, what are some other major pollutants? Well, we have volatile organic compounds or VOCs. They're hydrocarbons that that are come from a lot of different products, oftentimes building products, household products. Some examples of these VOCs that you might hear: benzene, toluene, formaldehyde. Plants actually also naturally release some VOCs, but typically not in the same way amount, I guess you could say, that other things. Sometimes they're in adhesives, air fresheners, drapes, floor polishes, glue, carpet backing, dyes, liquid cleaners, markers, paint, toilet cleaners. If you go look at any of your labels, you're going to notice you see a lot more stuff there. Here's a big exhaustive list of some things that you should know. Or, excuse me, you don't really need to know all these, but you should have an idea of what they come from. Uh, and a little bit about their VOCs. Okay, what are some other major pollutants? Mercury, a big one. So mercury gets emitted into the atmosphere and then it's deposited into rain and snow and gas particles. And then it accumulates in rivers and lakes and reservoirs when it moves through there, right? The mercury gets transported through watersheds and gets converted into methyl mercury. So this is really important. A lot of the things, and then that methyl mercury, we say, bioaccumulates in food webs, particularly in fish. They intake a lot of it. So one way we talk about mercury is in bioaccumulation, particularly in fish. So small fish will eat some, and they get a little bit of mercury, but their predators will eat them and they eat even more of them. So they accumulate even more mercury in their bloodstream. And as you go up the food chain, you see that larger big fishes have a big amount of mercury accumulated in their bloodstream. Coal and oil combustion, and that's bioaccumulation. A lot of times, if you're a pregnant woman, you will hear, or you know someone's pregnant, they will talk about them not eating fish. It's because of the mercury accumulation. Coal and oil combustions have concentrations of mercury in them and bioaccumulation. Even some light bulbs have a little bit in them too. This is again just how mercury gets into the system, and you can see your biomagnification of plants, or excuse me, into fish. So another major pollutant, carbon dioxide, we hear a lot about these days because we talk about it as a greenhouse gas, and it's something that we're measuring a lot more closely over time because we've noticed that carbon dioxide uh, has really increased at a steeper rate than we've seen other times more recently. And how is that affecting our environment, right, in the world we live in? And you'll hear carbon dioxide referenced a lot when you talk about climate change, right? A greenhouse gas that we think is maybe causing some climate change. around the world. Uh, okay. So what do we need to know? We need to know primary pollutants. Primary pollutants come directly from a source like a smokestack or an exhaust pipe. You can pinpoint exactly where it comes from. Secondary pollutants have to undergo some sort of transformation in the presence of sunlight or water or other compounds. This often occurs more in the daytime and in wet conditions. So if it's like warm and kind of moist. So here are your primary pollutants, and yes, you should have your primary pollutants memorized, and you should have your secondary pollutants memorized. Specifically, ozone, SO3, H2SO4, H2O2, HNO3, and your PANS. PANS actually stands for peroxyacyl nitrates. Basically, they're just part of photochemical smog. So here's kind of a better image for you to know. So yes, there are some natural ones, and then sources, things that primary pollutants would come from, things that you can identify. Uh, all these you should know. And then secondary pollutants, things that have to combine with something else, typically have some heat too in order to form them.